He has a nice picture. For those of you who have already joined, we will wait a few minutes before we start today's webinar. Let people sign in, and we'll start shortly. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar, Simple Steps to a Well-Run Business. Shortly, we will begin the webinar, but first I'd like to share some important information. Today's webinar will be presented by Bill Migley. He is a SCORE mentor and an MBA, Business Operations, Financial Management, Accounting. Besides his work experience, he was an adjunct professor at Pace University, Lubin School, where he taught financial management and accounting. Bill will also share the additional parts and when those parts will be presented later in today's broadcast. Next slide. First, I'd like to share information, particularly about SCORE in this right now. The first bullet on this slide, our goal, fostering vibrant small business through free mentoring and education. That's our mission. This webinar today is an example of the education element. All of our SCORE services are confidential, of course, the mentoring especially. It's free, it's open to startups and in-business people. Shortly, you will see the phone numbers and contact information for the various chapters. Although I mentioned SCORE, today's webinar is being hosted by the Hudson Valley SCORE chapters. Next slide, Bill. Here are the chapters of the Hudson Valley. The information here is for you should you want to meet with a mentor at a later point after today's webinar. As I said before, the services are free to all small business people starting or in business. Next slide. A little bit about the ground rules. First of all, everyone's speaker is muted, microphone is muted. And we would like to keep the pace of the webinar going. So if you have a question, we're going to ask that you use the Q&A button in the lower portion of your screen. And as we move through if there are questions that seem to be centering on one subject that maybe we need to clarify, I'll interrupt Bill and have him go through them. Otherwise, if it's individual questions, I may answer them back to you by way of the chat feature. So with that, Bill?
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Simple Steps to Well-Run Business. Today is part one of a three-part series. So as small business owners, you have so much to juggle. You got all the day-to-day activities, you have all the planning and strategic activities, and you have all the communicating activities. So it's kind of you're it. And this is just a small sample of what you typically encounter. And I would venture to guess the vast majority of your time goes to the left-hand side under operate, which is keeping the day-to-day going and thinking about, the financials, your targets, your inventory, all your day-to-day activities, your firefighting, so to speak. And then the two columns to the right, the navigate and the communicate, are, gee, be nice if we could get to that. But these are also critically important elements to a well-run business. Today, we're going to focus on the operate, and the next two sessions in July and August, respectively, will focus on the other two. So many businesses see the business as a bunch of disconnected pieces, and that's problematic. So how do we put the puzzle together so you can make better sense of your business? Because in doing so, you can see where your business is going. Again, it's always good to have a rear view mirror to see where you've been, but it's much more productive to take that information and use that to see where you're going. So simple steps to well-run business, we will help you to see the whole picture. Some of the concepts that we're going to focus on, we call it the well-run business six-pack. And again, the three areas: operate, navigate, and communicate. This afternoon, we're going to focus on operate, which is trending your numbers and having the right people. Navigate, talk about the business life cycle of typical businesses, and the 1, 2, 3 rule. Now, I'm sure we all know what the 1, 2, 3 rule is. And for those who don't, the 1, 2, 3 rule is the following: know your customers, know what they want, and number 3, simply give it to them. So, in other words, keep your customers satisfied. And the third track, again, is the communication. Communicating your core values to your customers, your employees, your vendors, so everybody's on the same page. And having an effective means to message that core value out to all those constituencies. Using this maritime analogy, the three primary elements of a boat: the hull is your foundation, must be seaworthy. The rudder provides the direction, and the sail provides the movement. So if we take these and turn it around from a business perspective, the hull would be to operate, the rudder navigate strategies, and the sail communicate or promotion. Or another way to look at it as ready, aim, fire. How many times do we all get into the rut of ready, fire, and we forgot to take aim? We don't know what we're shooting for. So those are the key elements, and we need to put them all in perspective and understand the role they play in developing a well-run business. Again, operate, be ready. That's your existence. Your strategies and your promotion and communication will lead you on the path to growth. So what's included in operate? two key elements, dollars and people. Let's keep in mind that numbers are objective, systems and relationships are subjective. Let's take a quick look at the dollars. Numbers are one of the key six-pack key points. And what we're strongly suggesting is you trend your numbers. Last month, Alan Zabusky presented taking the mystery out of financial statements and really had to interpret your financial statements and use them to help analyze your business. Here, we're going to take it a step further. If you're in a services business, typically, what are you going to look at? Profitability, you're going to look at your sales and the expenses. On a cash flow basis, you're going to look at your receivables. If you manufacture or distribute product, you're going to have sales that you should take accounting for, gross profit, expenses. Then the additional asset that becomes a big factor is inventory or stock, as well as receivables. So these are all the critical factors and critical numbers for virtually any type of business, whether you're a services provider or in selling product or manufacturing product. As we all know, cash is king. Sustainability in business means having a handle on cash coming in. And obviously, source of cash is sales. The collection of those sales through receivables or IOU, what your customers owe you, infusion of additional capital. Cash going out typically are your operating expenses, your inventory purchases, and investments in plant, property, or equipment. So these are the typical major inflows and outflows of cash. Then the question comes, do you have enough of it? Do you have enough to pay yourself, cover all your expenses, manage your receivables, have adequate funds for investments, and having a rainy day or a contingency fund should an unexpected event occur? So having all this information is really critical to understanding where you are. So have a handle on the important numbers. And we talked about it just a minute ago. And as Alan pointed out last month, where do you find that information? On your profit and loss statement. What's the best way to watch them? Trend your numbers. Typically, when you see something graphically, you start to see trends. Are things constantly up? Do they fluctuate from month to month? Are there particular spikes that occur? It becomes much more visible when you start to trend or plot your numbers. Again, let's take a look at demonstrating with taking some sales numbers. Capture your sales. I'm sure you all capture your sales and capture them on a monthly basis. You can aggregate it on a quarterly basis and clearly aggregate it on a 12-month basis. So now you have data points. So now you can take those data points and plot them. The green line is the cumulative sales number. The red line indicates those quarterly summaries, and the blue line indicates your monthly activity. So what jumps off the page to me looking at this is that and you take a look at the timeline across the bottom, somewhere between August through November, December, you have spikes. What would that tell you? You have a seasonal business. And because throughout the rest of those other periods, the other 7 or 8 months, things are relatively constant or flat. But you have these huge spikes on this quarter or quarter and a plus toward the end of the year. So you clearly have a seasonal business. So you can do that with sales. You can do the same thing for expenses as well as profit. Then if you put them all on the same chart, then it really becomes an eye opener to see, okay, are expenses increasing while sales are staying relatively flat? When do most of the expenses incur? Presumably, if you're buying inventory that is occurring just prior to those spikes in the selling process, that would make sense. So these are all the things that you can garner through looking at all of this data. So plotting them out is critical. Again, you can do the comparisons. You can just plot each and every one of them individually, sales, expenses, plot receivable flows. You can plot payable flows. And it also comes back to trying to determine some of your policies. For instance, your accounts receivable. What's your accounts receivable policy? Net 30 days? What is your payable process? Net 45 or net 60 days? That would be an ideal scenario if you're using those types of terms where you're collecting your receivables before you have to pay your vendors. You go with the other way around and you have to pay your vendors before you're collecting from your customers, then you're going to have more need for cash infusion somewhere along the line. So all this information starts to bring that to light. Sales tracking tools, again, simple things like Microsoft Excel, Apple Numbers, Google Sheets, and I'm sure within if you have a point of sale system, there may be tools in there that enable this to happen. Also through QuickBooks or any other accounting tool that you have, I'm sure there are options to be able to track these things and to trend them. So what will trending do? To me, as I said earlier, provides that visual, help you get the numbers. Maybe something jumps off the page, allows you to start to ask questions. Why is that happening at that point in time? So you can take action and be able to dig a little bit deeper and understand why that's occurring, and are there opportunities to change it? If there are spikes, are there opportunities to flatten the line, so to speak? It could also help you in forecasting the future. Where are you going? So trends, plotting your numbers, recording your numbers, and plotting your numbers are extremely valuable in terms of managing your business. And I would also suggest that if you are taking your business plan and you've laid that out, you could then start to make your comparison between your actuals to what your business plan or your budget for that year was. And then say, am I on track? Am I doing better than I had expected? Or are there some issues I need to address? So again, making these comparisons and doing these trends will better help you to analyze your business and really to take action to avoid any serious issues. So that's it on the numbers. Again, so we know where to get the numbers. Alan taught us that last month. And now we're telling you how to utilize the numbers, to trend them and to make the comparisons and to use that to interpret what's going on in your business. And again, I strongly suggest taking that the next step and clearly doing a annual business plan, and particularly a forecast of your P&L, and doing that comparison. Again, that will help to identify, again, are you staying on track or are you losing momentum? So now let's take a look at the relationships. Okay. Again, it's crucial to remember numbers are objective. Again, they are what they are, and systems and relationships are subjective. Let's look at the people. The bottom line is, if you own a business, you're in the people business. And one group will ultimately decide if your business succeeds, and I'm sure we can all guess who that is, your clients. But I would also suggest that your employees and your vendors are also a key ingredient to your success as well. Because if you have an employee that is not happy, disgruntled, whatever, and they're the front line to your clients, that's not a good message that may come across. So understanding all those elements of your clients are super critical, but understanding and keeping your employees happy as well as your vendors. Okay. From your client standpoint, they will be judging everything that you do. And again, that includes that interrelationship or that contact with your employees. Some questions to ask: do they enjoy doing business with you and your team? An issue that's always comes up is it easy to do business with your company? Or if you have so many hurdles that the client needs to go through, that it's really a drudgery to try to conduct business with you. And these are things that you can ask your customers, you can ask your employees, because they probably know good handle on the answer to these questions here. So just for comparative sake, which one of these experiences would you prefer? Okay, motor vehicle is a transaction, and matter of fact, you go in, you do it, and you move on to the next one. Go to Starbucks or any other type of entity, it's a relationship. And that's where you've established that you always want to go to Starbucks. I don't know anybody that really wants to go to motor vehicles unless they have to. So again, you really need to think about, is all your business just purely transactional? They just come to you because they have no other choice? Or they come to you because they have a good working relationship, they like your company, they like your people, they like you? How you treat people is critical. And I mentioned earlier, clients are super critical for sure, but your employees and your suppliers, your vendors are equally as important. So it bears repeating, if you own a business, you're in the people business. There's no avoiding it. So we have a little homework exercise for you to think about. And, with the intent here of opening up and understanding, what do your customers think of you? And maybe you talk with a few customers, or you set up a focus group and you talk with customers, talk with the people you do business with, find out what they really think. But I would also again suggest that you may do the same with your employees, because they'll tell you quite a bit as well. And potentially also your vendors. So again, establishing those relationships, understanding the needs of the people that you're serving, and making sure that you're addressing those needs appropriately. So, Bob, if we have any questions,
The ones that came in were individual questions, so
okay,
we're open.
okay. So if anybody has any questions, you want to put that into the Q&A box, that'd be great. I think most of the information pretty self-explanatory.
And just a reminder to everyone, a copy of the presentation will be included in an email that will be sent to all people who attended today.
Okay. So next month would be the second in the series, if you will, growing your business. And we're going to talk about navigate or strategies. Again, your sponsors today are the 6 chapters of the Greater Hudson Valley. Again, these are your contacts, and should you wish to follow up, schedule mentoring. And I thank you all for attending this afternoon.
Just
Bob,
wait 1 second, Bill. Let me see.
any more questions?
Oh, a question came up is, who do you poll or ask if you don't have employees or vendors yet?
Then talk directly to your customers. Or if you happen to be involved in some community group, like a chamber of commerce, or some particular business association, asking them how they approach their customers, services, or whatever the case may be. So, reaching out to get information is really involved in, I use the term focus group. And that focus group can be peers, could be others that are in similar businesses. So there's a number of different avenues to go on to get that type of input.
Okay. I have another question for you, Bill.
Yep.
How will this process differ when you're in the startup phase?
Well, the startup phase obviously goes back to that business plan that I referred to as a comparative once you get into business. So again, the fact that you're in a startup and attending, that's a great thing to keep all these elements in mind as you build your organization, as you build your business, to know what to anticipate. And even during startup, tracking your costs, again, if you had a startup business plan, that's what you should be comparing against. So track your sales, track your expenses, and how are you doing against what you thought you should be doing to be able to get your business up and going, and be able to, that enables you to make decisions as to modify your direction.
Okay. I have another question here. Is there a certain percentage breakdown you should spend on operate, navigate, and versus communicate?
Well, operating is depends upon the nature of your business. It's really to me, it's a matter of time that you develop to each, commit to each area. Because navigate is, really talking about setting your strategies and moving, how to move forward. Again, communicate is identifying how your core values. So those are things that don't necessarily have to cost you any money. Now, of course, if you're going to lay out a marketing plan on communication, that could cost you money. And that depends on how much you have to invest, you know, depending upon your business and who's the audience you're trying to reach. But really, I think the bigger challenge is committing the time to those additional areas. You get, by default, all your time is going to go into operate. You have to force yourself to go into the navigate and do the strategic planning and also into the communicating element. So that's really, to me, it's more time commitment than necessarily hard dollars and cents.
Okay. Another question. How do you create a budget, especially if you have spikes in revenue and expenses through the year?
Well, again, it's what causes the spikes, and then the obvious thing was, okay, if you're a seasonal business and really geared toward the holiday season, so to speak, from in the last quarter of the year, okay, so that drives your business. Okay, so then you have to take a look at, typically you have to spend money, particularly if you're selling something or manufacturing something prior to that, in the third quarter, so you have the product available to sell in the fourth quarter. So understanding those dynamics and then saying, okay, where am I going to generate the cash to buy the inventory in order to be able to sell it? And then obviously quickly turn the receivable around to collect and pay off the purchases of the inventory. So taking a look at those spikes and then saying, are there things that you can do to flatten the spikes? Some you may not be able to flatten it completely, but are there certain vendors you can work with that will commit to giving you a steady flow, a commitment of a steady flow of product during your peak selling season, so you don't have to pre-purchase everything? Things like that. That's what these trends. That's what doing this analysis enables you to do, is say, are there ways to mitigate those big ups and downs? May not be perfectly flat, but if you can lower the spike just a little bit, then it's going to go a long way.
Bill, just an additional comment here. The issue of budgeting is always a difficult wrestle. And if you look at it from a business perspective, the goods to manufacture the product or deliver the service, if you consider that as the variable costs, and then all the other associated costs as the fixed costs, the utilities and so forth, the rent, those are primarily the ones that you want to focus on and make sure that you have a good control on that budget. And the variable you measure to how much it costs you to make your product or service. And I think once you start to break those out, that helps you. And I found that if you start off looking at it at an annualized basis and then determine if you can break that down into quarters and if necessary into months, it helps you see where you might have some spiking. And
Right.
That's where cash flow, another accounting document, comes into play to help you modulate whether you have money or you don't have money. Now you introduce the bank line of credit and so forth. So it's
Right.
a more comprehensive answer than necessary, but understand that this is a sophisticated tool that can be of much benefit to you as a business owner.
Yeah, and that your point is well taken, Bob. Is really taking all the pieces of the puzzle and laying it out and putting it together. It's the chart that I showed. That plotted the cells. If you only looked at the green line, it looked like it was, relatively consistent, but it really wasn't. And that was the annual sales because everything got aggregated. When you took a look at the quarterly sales, then bang, you saw the big bumps. And the same thing with the monthly sales. And again, to Bob's point, to do the same thing with your expenses, whether it's your operating expenses or your inventory costs related expenses, that's when you start to see where these peaks and valleys are. And then you start to ask the question, can I flatten it? To what degree can I flatten it? And as I mentioned before, your terms in terms of your receivables and payables are a critical part of that cash management. You want to collect your receivables before you have to pay your vendors. You don't want it the other way around, for sure.
Okay, next question. When you're starting your first business, what is something that you wish you knew earlier in the process when it came to determining the sort of customer you were going after?
Well, again, this is where, developing that business plan tells you to really say, who do you believe your customers are? Doing your research, what's the demographics, and who's the really target customer that you're really looking to satisfy? Again, it may vary by service, and may depend upon the product you're selling, or whatever the case may be. You may have multiple services and multiple products that appeal to different um, elements of your customer. So again, trying to specify that and do the research and say, what are the demographics? Am I looking at the Hudson Valley? Am I looking at just a particular area, Rockland or Dutchess or whatever the case may be, and doing the research and find out what's the customer base. And then the other element is who's the competition? And taking a look at and trying to understand what customers are they satisfying and why, what's the draw to them. So all that up front is critical to really developing your business plan and ultimately your budget.
Okay, another question. What's a good way of hiring an operations director?
Somebody with well-rounded experience, to say the least. Somebody that has you know a broad base of experiences. When you hire a manager, the concept would be that they have a good understanding of all the specific activities under their responsibility. And so they can answer questions, they can direct the workforce in an intelligent manner. And the more experience that manager has, the more respect they're going to garner from their employees or their subordinates that they know what they're talking about. So just having somebody that has that hands-on experience is critical. And again, as broad a base of experience as possible.
Okay, next question, Bill. To use social media for business, can I share personal posts to connect with customer personality, or should I strictly post about business? I have been mixture of contents, and sometimes my partner posts more involving with personal feeling. I have heard that it is good to share something personal to attract people, to draw people into your personal story, but I worry it will be oversharing.
Well, that's probably a really great question for a marketing person. Again, you're to have a clear relationship with your customers is really having a good business relationship with your customer. Again, to the extent that you may also, with some of your customers, have a personal relationship, to me, that's above and beyond that business relationship. I would think most people would say separate the two, but that's not in my area of expertise, but that's my opinion. Bob, if you have any comment on that.
I have to agree with you. I think that if you have some value that you feel is important in your business and it can be more clearly demonstrated through some personal anecdote, that would be acceptable. But going beyond that is something that you may want to consider seriously protecting. There's a, it would be, an example would be, if you're a sole proprietor, why do you want to become an LLC? To protect yourself, to protect your assets. Well, personal information is an asset of yours. And so I would exercise the same restraint and control with my personal information as I would trying to protect a hard asset.
I would think what you would really like to share on social media would be testimonials from customers.
Yes.
And that would be of probably to me of greater value to other potential clients looking and say, oh, okay, I can relate to that comment or whatever. So I think that's probably your better bet is soliciting good testimonials from satisfied customers.
And I think that's it, Bill. That's the last question.
Okay, great. All great questions, and appreciate what everybody asking them. Hopefully, we've satisfactorily answered them.
Bill, thank you for
Okay.
today's webinar presentation, and to all attendees, thank you. And as I had said before, a recording of today's session will be in a link, an email you will receive within the next day. So thank you again, and look for the notices of the continuing series of this next two sessions. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we appreciate you attending today's webinar.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, everybody, for attending.
Be safe.
Right.